Welcome to FailCraft, the podcast where we dive into the messy, real side of success and explore how setbacks become the stepping stones to growth and clarity. I'm your host, Ezekiel Iferia, and today's guest is Garrett Wood, a clinical hypnotherapist and executive functioning specialist who helps founders and leaders perform at their best but not at the expense of their lives. He knows these struggles intimately. Early in his career, Garrett fell into the success at any cost trap, ignoring his body's warning until a tragic loss shattered the illusion that worth equals achievement. He realized that the math of burnout doesn't work. He's here to talk about how he rebuilt from that moment, how he helps others and how he helps others end the boom and bust cycle and why sustainable success actually starts with your nervous system. So Garrett, it's a pleasure to have you on Failcraft. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me here, Ezekiel. I'm excited.
All right, let's get things started, Garrett. Your work is incredibly grounded in the reality of burnout. You mentioned that early on you fell into the trap of measuring worth by achievement until a tragic loss shattered the illusion of success at any cost. Can you take us back to that season of your life? So, what did it feel like when that illusion finally broke?
Yeah, I was working for a pretty big organization, but I believed in the values of the work we were doing. I believed we were helping people, and it was really rewarding to see the impact that the work we did helped those people. But it,
Mm,
it was really tough. We were a hospitality company, service-based industry, so in health and wellness. So we were open 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, it felt like. And so it felt like you always had to be on. And it was challenging. Um, I really enjoyed the work that we did. And so they say, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. But there's another flip side to that, where if you love what you do, you'll always be working no matter what. So it was really hard for me to kind of turn that off. If the organization was only open 5 hours a day, I'd be thinking about it for 10. But because we were open for 20 hours a day, I was thinking about it for 25. But when we were there, it was really exciting to be a part of. It was really easy to let those aches and pains in your body kind of tune out. It was really easy to kind of dismiss some of the frustrations you had in your personal relationships as just normal, as part of the job of what it takes to be effective at work. And for a long time, it felt like those accomplishments on paper were worth it. I was getting really good feedback that the effort I was doing was making a change in people's lives. Uh, but there were days where it was really overwhelming, where you'd have a rough day where the numbers wouldn't come out the way you wanted, or there'd be some upset personally, professionally. And you'd kind of question everything. Like, is it all worth it? Is it enough? And at one point I looked around and kind of looked at other people that were my mentors and kind of the exemplars. And I was always like, wow, man, this guy's been doing this for 20 years. I've been here for 5, and he's just doing it every day. He's doing a great job. If he can do it for, 4 times longer than me, then like, what do I have to complain about? But eventually that person was let go. And I was sitting in a meeting with their replacement. And it was 2 weeks later after he let go that I was already in meetings with the person they hired to replace him, which was already kind of challenging to kind of wrap my head around. But in that meeting, we got word that he had given so much of himself for the last 20 years to that organization that without that title, his position, and access to kind of the identity that he created for himself, he didn't really feel like there was much left in his life that was worth living for. So he chose to take his own life. And that was a really big wake up call, because it felt like, oh, wow, this is the same path I'm on now. And if you don't look around, if you don't figure this out, 5, 10 years from now, this could be the future that's all waiting for us. And so it was in that moment that I realized that this is a big deal. It's not just normal to have these aches and pains. It's not just normal to have these frustrations. Something's really going on here that we need to pay attention to. And it wasn't long after that I opened the clinic that I run now, Gnosis Therapy, where we help high achieving, high masking people prevent burnout, hopefully, or at least recover from it if they need to. Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much for sharing that story. Garrett, how did that specific moment force you to rethink, everything you thought you knew about performance?
Yeah. We often think that success is built at successes requires sacrifice. that to get this really challenging outcome, this really hard to achieve thing, I have to do all of this extra work. And so it's really easy to kind of sell yourself short and skip some hours of sleep, skip some downtime, miss out on some important moments in your private life to really see like this thing come to fruition that you care about at work. And I think in the short run, that might be true. Like if you're running a marathon, mile 20 to 26 is going to be a challenge. You might need to yell at yourself and push yourself and cajole yourself and do whatever you need to do to work. But if that's all you have is that voice, that drive, that push, it gets really challenging. And so in that moment, when I saw that, the worst case scenario is the end of his life and the end of the lives of the relationships people had with him, that you can only push yourself so far before it pushes back. And now there's no chance for success or opportunities for him or for any of the clients that he served or the people that he helped mentor, even like myself. And so sometimes pushing and all of that sacrifice is a waste of time. It results in really unfortunate outcomes. And so I started thinking about, well, what's the alternative to that? Maybe if we choose not to think about success requiring sacrifice, maybe even the ultimate one, what would it look like if we chose to think about something different? And so that's when I really just started asking that question, changed my mind.
So, Garrett, you talk about the boom and bust cycle. So, when you were in the middle of that cycle yourself, what were the hidden beliefs or subconscious rules that kept driving you to push until you broke?
Yeah. I think a lot of us, myself included, we have some ideas that we've made about ourselves, the world, and others, and our place in the world at a really young age. A lot of developmental psychologists talk about those first 5 years of life being really transformative.
Mm-hmm.
And we have these experiences and we create these implicit beliefs that we don't even know exist in the future. They're still just running there in the background. If we were asked about them, we might not even admit that they're there. But sometimes they come out to, I'm not enough, or I'm not worthy, or I'm not lovable, or I don't matter. And anytime we kind of have a version of that belief running around in the background, it's really challenging because if we have evidence to suggest that that belief is true, it's really hard emotionally to be ourselves. And so instead we start finding out ways to create and collect evidence to disprove those beliefs that I am good enough. I do matter. I am worthy. I can achieve. And so a lot of accolades that people seek are in a way to try to soothe that insecurity or that feeling, that implicit belief that they had at a young age. And the hard part is once you've achieved something, it works for a little bit to kind of starve off that insecurity. But the more we achieve, the more that insecurity kind of comes along for the ride. And so there's always this, arms race that we're playing with ourselves. And it's a really indirect way of trying to combat that subconscious belief because it's trying to prove it wrong indirectly. And so if you achieve a bunch and then you get on that hedonic treadmill and all of a sudden it doesn't feel like it's enough, you have to kind of keep achieving more. And that process always puts you in that way of having to move the goalpost further and further and further. The more you achieve, the more you have to achieve just to feel normal. And that gets really challenging for a lot of people. Creates that burnout cycle eventually.
All right, really great response, Garrett. So you realized that IQ, EQ, and grit all fail when without nervous system regulation. So how did you discover that? Was there a moment where you tried to, grit your way through a problem and it's just backfired?
Yeah, I think that shows up in mostly conflicts, whether it's at work, at home, where you have your feelings, your emotions, they have their feelings, their emotions, and everybody has their
Mm-hmm.
thoughts. And we have different
Yeah.
thoughts about it and they come in conflict. If you're in a heightened state, you're frustrated, there's not a lot of communication that can take place. There's not a lot of agreement that can happen. And so where I first experienced that was with a marriage and family therapist, where I'm there with my former partner. We're frustrated. I'm frustrated. And the therapist is there holding space for both of us. So I can get frustrated and come back down, and they can get frustrated and come back down. And the therapist is there holding that space for both of us to be able to have that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's people that the Gottmans, marriage and family therapist couple, they will actually put like oximeters on people. So when they can see their blood pressure rise, or they can see their oxygen saturation go up, or their pulse go up, they'll hit timeout and be like, okay, we're no longer having a productive conversation. We need to slow down. We need to regulate our nervous system, and then we can come back and do that. And they've seen a lot more success at being able to work through conflict and manage expectations and maintain a relationship through conflict by doing that. And there's other areas. In the study of trauma, there's Dr. Bruce Perry, who works with mostly traumatized children, where he has to feel connected with them, regulated with them first before he can start developing any of the therapeutic processes that come for his work. And it's kind of this idea that if we don't feel safe in our nervous system, we can't access some of these thoughts and these beliefs. Our ability to have logic, reason, and willpower is dependent upon our ability to feel safe and secure. So sometimes if we don't feel safe and secure and we're trying to reason and logic with someone, we just kind of keep butting our head against the wall. And it doesn't matter the words we're actually saying. It doesn't even matter the logic of the argument. All of those can be valid and sound, but it doesn't land with that person. It doesn't land with us because we have that inability to be regulated together. And so that's a really powerful tool when you're in the workplace and even in your home life, obviously. When you feel connected and are able to work together in a collaborative way to overcome conflict versus a combative kind of experience for people.
So I'd like to know, how hard was it to shift from a mindset of suppression to regulation? Did that feel like weakness at first?
Yeah, when you pride yourself on being a person that can work hard, that when the going gets tough, the tough get going kind of mindset. I think I can, so I can. That shift into being like, okay, this is a lot. I'm going to take my time. I'm going to pace myself here is a different challenge for sure. But some of the most successful marathon runners are people who run a mile, jog a mile, run a mile, jog a mile, run a quarter of a mile, walk the rest. If we can stay inside of our adaptive tolerance, we can actually work longer over a more period of time. So it goes back to that old, the tortoise and the hare example. That strong, steady current over time eventually gets us the results in the long run, and it's easier to maintain with less drama. So it's interesting that that story still shows up now.
How did that personal experience of hitting the wall shape the what you call the A3 framework, the assess, accommodate, and align? So, which of these, first of all, tell us about them, and then proceed to tell us which of these three steps was the hardest for you to personally master.
Yeah. So thinking about if success doesn't come from sacrifice, it comes from our well-being. The longer we can stay there, the easier it is, the better our well-being is, the easier it is to perform for a longer period of time, the more likely successful outcomes become for us. Well, what does well-being mean? What does flourishing look like? And how do we decide what part to lean into in your life? And I think that's really challenging. So the idea behind the A3 framework is to try to make that just a little bit simpler to think about and to act on for people. And then also too, to take it from really general advice that could be good for anybody to more specific, what is actually the most beneficial for you? So there's a couple things that show up in there. There's 7 unique drivers that I think help people create a larger foundation of their well-being. One of those is understanding their own executive functioning strengths. So some people are really good at task initiation and they have a hard time getting a project across the finish line. Some people are the exact opposite. They can crush at that last few minutes and get it across the finish line, but starting is impossible for them. So if you know that about yourself, it makes it much easier to design the way you work through there. But that's just one of the 7 drivers. Another one would be our values and our strengths. If we know what keeps us going, what motivates us, and the strengths we enjoy using, we can kind of lean more into them. We also know that if our work doesn't allow us to express those strengths and we need those to feel okay about our day, we need to find an outlet that we can do that in. That's great if it's our work. But if it's not, we can try to find it somewhere else to increase that well-being. But then we also have our attachment styles, how we choose to show up in relationships with our boss, with our colleagues, with our significant others. When we have conflict, do we lean in and get closer? Does it feel safer to pull further away? And then how much stress does that kind of interpersonal navigating cause us day to day? The more secure someone is, the easier it is for them to adapt their style and work with more people. And the more insecure, either anxious, avoidant, or both, the more challenging it is to be able to do that. But if you know it and you can call out and see those behaviors, you also know how to accommodate it, meaning you can get what you need to feel safe, which then makes it much easier to align your work with the work you're doing. And we have more drivers than that too. We have those subconscious beliefs that we talked about. You know, do I matter? Am I worthy without my achievements? So is it okay to just be me? And we also have these emotions that show up. A lot of people think that emotions are left at the door, that, you know, you don't need them at work. But if someone actually can't feel emotions, they have brain damage because that part of their brain that registers emotions has, you know, had some actual head trauma to it. People can't reason well. They just get stuck in logical loops where they can never come to a satisfying conclusion. And so it stops them from taking action. So if we don't know that, if we try to leave our emotions at the door, we're not well acquainted with them, it actually inhibits our ability to perform well and respond well and sustain performance over time. So being able to understand, I'm not just bad, sad, glad, or mad. Why and what am I really feeling? And getting, like, developing your sommelier, your emotional palette, so you can have the discernment between those different emotions is a really powerful tool. And then this idea too of our sensory experience. Some people really need stimulating environments to perform their best. And when you put them in a really quiet environment like a library, they get overwhelmed because it's too quiet. It's so lack of stimulating that it just drives them to a point of anxiousness. And then other people, you have a little noise in the background and that's all they can hear, and it pulls their attention away from that thing in front of them. And that's challenging for them. So making sure your environment matches what your nervous system needs. And then, you know, if you don't have any sleep, food in your system, you don't have any protein in your system recently, it's gonna be really hard to show up and pay attention to what's going on in front of you. So making sure those bio budgets are balanced as well is really important. And that's a lot of things to try to navigate for somebody. And depending on where they're in that stage of burnout, we might be adding more to their system that's already overwhelmed. So that's not a very effective strategy. So trying to figure out where they are in that stage of burnout, what's driving it, what's the biggest lift for their nervous system that they don't need, that we can actually bridge that gap, and then make sure that the work they're doing is aligned with how they work best, is a really powerful way of moving people through burnout and then also keeping them from burning out originally.
Hey, so Garrett, after redefining your own life and helping so many others do the same, I'd like to know, what does being successful truly mean to you now?
Yeah. Successful, I think, is different for everybody. Everyone's got unique talents, strengths, and gifts out there that share with people. They have different things that they appreciate about themselves, and they have different relationships. But this idea of being able to continuously show up and pursue those activities without costing yourself your health, your well-being, and your relationships is actually what I think success is being able to pursue those things without that great sacrifice of yourself.
That's another interesting one. I mean, it's amazes me all the time to see how different people have different perspectives, different meaning to what being successful is to them. So that's a great one, dear Garrett. So finally, for our listeners who want to discover the hidden dynamics behind their own burnout or check out your A3 framework, where is the best place for them to go?
Yeah. So they can go to my website, and on there they can take there's a little pop-up. They can click on it and it'll take them to an assessment where they can see how burned out they are and what's probably driving it for them. Um, and they can follow me on LinkedIn if they want to be really professional, or if they're a little more personable, they can follow me on Instagram, and all of those are at gnosistherapy.com.
All right, I'll be sure to link that to the show notes so that it's easier for the listeners to find it. So this has been such a valuable conversation, Garrett, and I'm indeed excited to have you on the show today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here, Ezekiel. It was great.